Greetings, viewers. As you can see, I'm getting ready for No Shave November, so if you'd like to join me, post a comment. Today we'll be talking about installing the Miltech Third Cat Delete and valve controller in the Lotus Emira. Ho, ho, ho. Merry Christmas. When I shared a picture recently, my daughter said that I was starting to look like Santa. What do you think? Any resemblance? During this season of giving, why not give your loved ones a gift that might just change their lives for the better? My YouTube channels, websites, and Facebook groups. They're free, and you never know what little piece of information might be just what they needed. This is Santa Pete wishing you and yours a very Merry Christmas. And you might wonder, why would I make this modification to the Lotus Emira? And I guess the main reason is because sound is very important to me. Sound matters, as you can also see in this video here where I compare the sounds with the Lotus Elise and the Alfa Romeo 4C. So when you're looking at the driving experience, there are a couple things that are extremely important to me. One is the aesthetics of the car, and another is the sound. There's just something about a good exhaust sound that really excites me, and I really enjoy that about vehicles. So when I first test drove the Lotus Emira, I was surprised. The exhaust was okay, but I actually thought it was kind of subdued. The Emira felt restless, like a caged animal, and I wanted to set it free, to let it roar. And so ever since I did that, I was thinking, hey, if I can find a good exhaust enhancement, then I think I'm going to install that. And everybody seems to be pretty happy with these third cat deletes. So I've listened to some comparisons of the sound coming out of the car and wanted to go ahead and install it. And I installed it not just by myself, because quite frankly, I'm not much of a mechanic. I try not to do a lot of mods to my cars. I don't do a lot of the maintenance on my cars myself. That's just not me. So I decided to gather together some friends for moral support and also to help with the installation. And we did it as a local Lotus and Friends car meet. I think we had about 10 Lotus cars of various vintages, as well as a couple other really cool cars. And of course, everybody was very interested in my single post garage lift. So if you'd like to learn more about the meet and my garage lift, then watch this other video. Today's video, just so you know, is not going to be a detailed installation video because Dragoon, one of the members of the Emira forum, has already done a pretty good job of creating an installation video. And then you have, in addition to that, the installation instructions provided by GRP. So I don't think it's necessary to create a whole new video, but I am going to try to add some of my own experiences and lessons learned, and I think I have some value to add. So if you're planning to do this, your Lotus Emira, I think that my notes will help in addition to those install videos and other resources. So here we go. And I've got some notes here to make sure I don't miss anything. The video is organized into two main sections, things that surprised me and then tips to help you with the disassembly and the installation. And I've tried to lay out my tools similar to the way that Dragoon did in his installation video, just so you can see if there are any differences between what he had ready and what I had ready. And in this video, I'm also going to include some things that I had to find during the installation process because of various snags that I hit and things like that. So there are some additional supplies and tools that I would recommend you have handy just in case. Started to remove the diffuser in order to install my third cat delete on the Lotus Emira, and already some interesting observations and one problem. So these screws right here, I was able to remove pretty easily, but I was surprised by how much debris there was up there. So all kinds of sand and dust was falling out as I was unscrewing these. And the fan in my drill was, shooting it all over the place. So that's something to just be aware of. The other problem I'm having is that back here, there are another 10 of these bolts. This one in the middle is giving me grief. It's corroded or stripped or something. And, it's loose. I've been able to unscrew it quite a bit, but it will not come out. And I've tried to pull it down a little bit. And I'm struggling with that one a little bit, not sure what I'm going to do. So even though the car is just barely over a year old, you already see significant corrosion and some issues like this. So I kind of expect that with any mechanical project. You're always going to have a couple little bumps along the way, but I'm a little surprised with it being such a new car. Coincidentally, I have a buddy who is down in Charlotte doing this same install today, and he's actually wrapping up, so he's ahead of me. And I couldn't see what was under here. It was kind of nice to be able to phone a friend and try and work this out. I ended up using bolt cutters to just snip off this bolt because I didn't know what else to do. I mean, without having access to the inside to secure that nut and stop it from spinning, there really wasn't any other good solution. Some observations on the diffuser. I noticed that these vanes, which there are 4 of them. If you look on the underside of the car, you can see there's 4 of those vanes, were just chock full of gravel. And I was able to vacuum these out pretty easily. But there's also these 2 central ones, and you can only access them through these little points at the end. And, I was able to get a little bit of suction and get some of that out of there, but I'm sure there's more in there. Also, I noticed on the car here that, these were chock full of gravel and debris, and you've got this little panel that I'm assuming once everything is assembled could still be removed to clean that out if you want. Might not be super easy to clean out. I mean, everything was kind of packed in there. I had to scrape it and loosen it before I could vacuum it out. This is my garage vac after a few years using shop vacs and whatnot. I just figured that having something on the wall was going to be more convenient. I don't have a huge garage, so this keeps it sort of off the floor and out of the way. If you'd like to get the same or similar model, they have several different models. I'll include a link in the video description. You might want to take some black tape to seal some of these recesses so that they don't accumulate debris after you do this installation, but that's entirely up to you. I didn't actually do it. I just figured I'd accept it the way it's designed. There was a fair amount of corrosion. So one of the things people recommended was to get a spare exhaust gasket. And as you can see, mine is fairly well corroded and worn. So fortunately, I had ordered one in advance. And during the disassembly process, trying to take the diffuser off, I had 10 bolts I had to remove along one edge, and one of them would not come off. And they're attached by these U-clips, okay? I'll try to include some better pictures, but basically there are these U-clips and then the bolt goes into that. But you don't have any visibility, right? The bottom of the car is clean. You can't see that there's a U-clip in there. You can't see what's happening on the back end of that thing. And that caused me some grief. So this is the one that ultimately failed, and I had to use bolt cutters to cut this thing because I just couldn't couldn't get it down. Now that I've got the diffuser panel off, you can kind of see there are these U-clips that I think one of the other members of the forum had mentioned some of them can go bad. So I have ordered some of those, but this one in the center has definitely gone bad, and I'll need to replace that. So the deal here is that, unfortunately, Lotus used some pretty cheap U-clips in there. These are just some sort of standard, maybe galvanized steel. And if you look real close, I don't know if this will come through, but like where the threaded portion is that the bolt screwed into has just completely detached, and that was spinning freely. So that's why I couldn't get it out. Now, I did find, based on the recommendation of another member, some really nice replacement clips. Unfortunately, I didn't order them in advance, so I currently have my diffuser attached with 8 screws, and it's missing 2 of those. This is the stainless U-clip that was recommended to me. It works with the bolts that I removed, although you might again want to get some stainless bolts, but it will work with the existing bolts. And I'll include a link in the video description so you can pick up these as well. Okay, but I would highly recommend that. While you're in there, just replace those. Also, on the topic of corrosion, it was mentioned in the disassembly instructions that some of the bolts, like on the mid-pipe flange, might be hard to get off. They might require some pre-soaking for a period of time with a penetrating lubricant. And so before my guests arrived, I tried to do some disassembly so at least I could get to the stage where I could apply that treatment to those bolts to make sure I wouldn't have trouble. Now, as it turns out, once I put a wrench on those bolts, even before putting any penetrating oil on them, I was able to get them to break free. So they weren't corroded too terribly and stuck too bad. Plan on an extra hour or 2 to let it soak in case your bolts are also stuck and corroded. Another thing worth mentioning is that during disassembly and removal of the diffuser, I found this clip. It kind of fell down onto the floor. I don't know where it came from. One of the other snags we hit was that this panel on one side of the diffuser was very loose. The factory adhesive had failed. You could see there was adhesive all over it, but it was not sticking the 2 parts together anymore. And on the other side of the car, that one seems to be holding fast. But I wanted to go ahead and use some new adhesive, whatever your adhesive of choice is. I use something called Freesol, and make sure that that panel is firmly affixed, because otherwise that's the kind of thing where you might just lose it driving down the road and you'd never know until you took a look and noticed that it was missing. And parts like that can be hard to find and replace. So anyhow, just wanted to mention these 2 clips. I did not reinstall. I'm still not sure where they go. I will at some point take a look and see where they go and if I can replace them or not. Near the rear edge of the car, there were a couple of these Allen inset bolts that had to be removed. And they all came out cleanly, but when I was trying to reinstall the diffuser, I couldn't get this one in. It just wasn't aligning. I don't know. The thread looks like it might be a little bit messed up. I don't know, what it's screwing into, if that thread is messed up. So I have a little bit of work still to do on the diffuser to make sure that it has the same number of bolts that it originally did, holding it firmly in place. I'm not really worried about it because there are a lot of bolts down there, but still, I'd like it to be as complete as possible. So just as a heads up, you could run into some snags with things like that as well. And the final thing that surprised me was that there was quite a bit of variation in the manufacturing process and the tolerances for the exhaust components, right? So I've compared notes with several other folks who have done this install and folks who have bought pipes from different manufacturers, and we've encountered different things. So in some cases, the straight pipe replacement is smaller than the original, and so you have to expand it using a pipe expander. And in other cases, it's actually too large. And like in my case, it was a very tight fit. And we actually had to use some emery cloth to sand both the inside of the receiving end and the outside of the replacement straight pipe in order to get it in there. I've also heard someone have an experience where a pipe was not perfectly round. It was a little bit sort of oval. I don't know if it had gotten crushed or what the deal is. But these are all issues you may have to deal with when you're doing this project. Moving into the tips section, I'm going to first just give you a list of some additional supplies and tools that you might want to have on hand. And then as I go through the different stages of tips, I'll explain how you might use these things. So here's the list. Number 1, grease, penetrating lubricant, a new exhaust gasket, an exhaust pipe expander, exhaust adhesive or paste, emery cloth, and calipers for measuring the exhaust pipe diameter, riv nuts or better stainless U-clips, bolt cutters, adhesive like Freesol or whatever your favorite adhesive would be to use in this setting, scrap wood and a miniature sledgehammer, Velcro, black zip ties, and wire protection. So that's for protection from heat and sharp edges. Now I'd like to talk about disassembly tips, but this first one really applies for the whole project. You really don't want to tackle this alone. It's likely that there are going to be cases where you need a second set of hands or you need to alternate with someone because you're just getting exhausted. Trying to wrestle that third cat off took a lot of elbow grease, and I think 3 different people worked on it. So sometimes you've got someone holding the pipe while someone else is holding a wooden dowel and bashing on a sledgehammer. And other times, you're just alternating, who's rotating and trying to push that thing off or pull it on. It's a very tight space. You don't get a lot of leverage. And so it's just good to have multiple people that can help out with that process. GRP's instructions said optionally you could disconnect an exhaust pipe hanger bracket. I would say definitely do that. You need that to get the third cat off and also to get the new straight pipe on. So definitely remove that hanger bracket. As I mentioned a minute ago, getting this stuff assembled and disassembled takes quite a bit of manpower. And to get that third cat off, you might need a wooden dowel and a sledgehammer. It was really stuck on there in my case. And another reason you might need some extra hands around, that mid-pipe flange really kind of got in the way when we were trying to remove the third cat and install the new straight pipe. So, you want someone there to either hold it out of the way, or I did use a bungee cord, and you kind of bungee it and have it pull away because it's got quite a bit of flex in the flex pipe that's beyond it. But having another person there to kind of hold things away as another person is wiggling and moving, pushing or pulling that pipe is very helpful. Tips for installation of the straight pipe. So number 1, in my case, it was very tight, right? So we tried to insert it into the receiving end and we got it in a tiny little bit, but boy, it was a struggle. And so we got some emery cloth, lubed that up with some WD-40 and sanded all around the exterior of that pipe and around the interior of the receiving end. And we ended up actually doing that twice. Still required a ton of elbow grease. We also lubricated it. So we had some grease, and the grease is great for a couple of reasons. So number 1, you've got that exhaust pipe gasket that you're probably going to replace. And it's got like a little inset, but it hangs like this, and it can easily fall out of that. And you don't want to bolt the flanges back together if that is not in its correct recess. And when we first kind of matched things up, it was not. So if you get some thick grease or something, you kind of goop some in there and it'll hold it in place. It'll hold that gasket in place while you get things bolted together. And then later on, that'll just burn off. So there's no harm there. We use that same lubricant. It could be like a Vaseline or an automotive grease or whatever, and put it around the receiving and male side of the new straight pipe to help us get it in there since our tolerances were so tight. The other thing I should mention is that when we had the new straight pipe installed, trying to get the flange lined up with that straight pipe was pretty challenging. And I think we had at one point 3 guys, using pretty much their whole strength. One guy with a pry bar trying to help position it, another guy trying to pull on the receiving end of that mid pipe of the flange, and then another guy kind of trying to push or pull the new straight pipe into place. So you have to be a little bit careful because, the panels underneath there that you might be using that pry bar against are aluminum. But we were able to find some places we could wedge it in there. And with the 3 of us, we're able to get it lined up enough. And then maybe you need a 4th person to insert the bolts and kind of get it cinched up enough to hold so that you can then release it all. So anyhow, many hands make light work in this case. And I don't know that it's always going to be, that challenging. Again, it could have to do with the tolerances with this replacement straight pipe. I kind of felt like maybe the angle on that, because it's a 90-degree angle, wasn't quite as much as it should be because we had to kind of pull it toward the rear of the car. And if the angle had been a tiny bit more, I think those flanges would have lined up more precisely. But with a hand-built car like this, it's really hard to get everything consistent from one vehicle to the next. So you just have to plan on and expect to have some variations and deal with those when you encounter them. At this stage, if you're installing the third cat delete, but not the valve controller, then that's the extent of my tips for that part of it. The next tips are about the valve controller installation. I was grateful that I had someone else there that had done this install recently, because one of the things he mentioned was you have to be careful when you're routing the wires. He was routing them, and then after he had everything reassembled and looked at the car from the outside, you could actually see some of the wires pretty clearly, and they just kind of like went across one of the openings. So with his help, we were able to route things in a way that they shouldn't be visible from the exterior. One of the things that you read about a lot in the forums when people are talking about this installation is concerns about the valve controller and water and weather and heat and things like that. And I also kind of added to that, I was worried about the wires rubbing against sharp edges of the car. So I just wanted to make sure everything was protected. And there are a couple different ways you can go about this. So number one, I wanted to protect the wires from heat and from those sharp edges. And so I got a wire enclosure that you use for routing electrical wires. It has some heat tolerance, and it especially is good because it protects the wires against any sharp edges. And it's black, so it blends in with all of the bodywork in that part of the car. The other part of this then has to do with locations, and people have suggested so many things. Some people said, you should put the controller into a Ziploc bag to protect it from weather. People have talked about locating it in different locations. One member even designed and 3D printed a box, a little enclosure to hold the controller, and I think he's selling those on the forum. But at any rate, what I decided to do was, way up in the fender well, far away from the exhaust, so it shouldn't get super hot up there. Actually mounted on the inside of the fender is a little recessed box, I'd call it. I'm not sure what it's for, but it looks like it's almost perfect for the valve controller. So what I did is I got some Velcro, I put it up there, I put it on the back of the controller, I stuck it up there to kind of just hold it in place. I took any excess wire and coiled that together and then put it up there next to it. And then that little box or recess, whatever you want to call it, actually has some holes that make it easy to use zip ties. So then I use zip ties, going several different ways to hold that thing in place. So really there shouldn't be any risk that that thing's going to move. The other thing to bear in mind is as you're routing the wire, you want to make sure you use black zip ties because those could potentially be visible from the outside. And that's really all it took. You want things to be fairly well routed, snug, no excess wire flopsing around. But once you accomplish that, then you should be good to go. And I'm pretty comfortable with the location of the valve controller and the wiring that we're not going to have any problems. Everything seems pretty secure and out of the way. The valve controller comes with a couple of key fobs, which I actually like. They're pretty cool. But you can also program your HomeLink system, the thing you use to control your garage door opener from your car, to control the valve controller. And so I did that as well. And that's pretty handy.
What mode are we in?
So this is normal, right? Tour mode.
Tour mode. Valve mode. Like a proper race car there. But it will sound the same.
Sport mode.
Wow. You just get better going. That is
That's track mode.
It's the most perfect tunnel vehicle now.
Yeah. That's beautiful. I mean, there are certain things I like about cars. You know, it's the look and the sound.
It's your world and I'm just a squirrel trying to get a nut to move your butt.
Please subscribe now. You know you want to. And why not go nuts and set notifications on so you'll be notified every time I put out new content.